In our last session, we finished a very long and complicated letter, number 18, and then a very, very short letter, which was basically a thank you to Sinnett for some small gifts that he had brought back for not only KH, but also for Moria. This letter number 20 was received in Ambala, which is actually not too far from Simla. So he was on his way from his home in Allahabad to Simla to participate in the Simla Eclectic Theosophical Society.
So that's the official name that they're going to call it.
Yes, so the Anglo-Indian branch, when it was actually inaugurated, became the Simla Eclectic Theosophical Society. Now, let's see, reading this letter number 20.
Letter number 20, received on August 5th, 1881, from KH. Having nothing particular to say, I will simply attend to your questions which, quote, seem to be many and to multiply. At any rate, thirst for knowledge was never regarded as a sin, and you will always find me prompt to answer such questions that can be answered. That's cool.
So once again, we don't have Sinnett's letter, but obviously based on that last letter he received, he had numerous questions, and he wrote them all out in his letter to KH. And now he is answering those. He says his questions seem to be many and to multiply. That's from the Hindu scriptures, referring to certain types of gods who seem to be many and to multiply. But he says, I'm always prompt to answer whenever I can, meaning if they're not something that it's forbidden for me to talk about.
Certainly, I am of opinion that since our correspondence was established for the good of the many, it would prove of very little profit to the world at large unless you recast the teachings and ideas contained therein, quote, in the form of an essay, not only on the occult philosophical view of creation, but upon every other question. The sooner you begin your, quote, future book, the better. For who can answer for unexpected incidents? Our correspondence may break off suddenly, the obstacle coming from those who know best. Their mind, as you know, is a sealed book for many of us, and which no amount of magic can break open.
All right. So he is pointing out here that Sinnett is going to have to recast everything that he's learning so that it will be more digestible for the general public. These are concepts that they've never heard before.
Planetary spirit.
Completely foreign to them. Mm-hmm. And he's hoping that Sinnett will be the person who can do that. They recognize, KH recognizes, that Isis Unveiled was not the greatest book. In fact, it raised as many questions as it answered.
As it tried to answer.
They made a valiant effort, but it's also difficult in that there were numerous contributors. We don't know how many different adepts contributed, because different ones would occupy HPB's body and write down their own thoughts on different subjects. So it ended up being a mass of manuscript from various different writers using her as the amanuensis. And then she and Alcott were left to try to edit that whole thing. And it was a daunting process.
So we know that it wasn't just Moria and KH.
Yeah, right. There were others. And Alcott said he didn't know the names of all of them, but he recognized different personalities. Each one had a very distinct personality.
It's so interesting that we don't know of any other times in documented history that they've done this. Is that really the only time and the only person that they've done this with?
That I'm aware of. I'm sure that there are others that are not well documented, because whenever they find someone that they can use in that way and that person is in agreement, then they would absolutely do the same thing.
I mean, to our viewers, we say this in many of our videos, there are thousands of books and people that say ascended masters or adepts or enlightened beings are working through them. They say the thousands of those all over the place, but we're skeptical that most, if not all of those other ones we're skeptical about all of those, really.
And this is where discernment comes in. If you can't tell the difference between someone who is just spouting nonsense that they're imagining in their head and this type of information, then that's on you. You have to develop the capability of sorting out what is useful, what is not useful, what is true, what is just made up nonsense.
Some of it does seem like nonsense. Just to be clear, there are many books that I've even looked at, like Conversations from God, for example, or A Course in Miracles. I mean, there are so many that are supposedly channeled, and most of them that I've seen are largely about the world will heal itself if we just all love each other, be loving. The answer is love, and that's what a lot of them just. Of course, there are more details than that. A Course in Miracles has a lot of great things, but are they anything at all like these letters? Do they speak of anything to the depth, or approaching the depth of wisdom that we're finding here? I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Further aids to reflection will, however, come in good time. And the little I am permitted to explain may, I hope, prove more comprehensive than Eliphas Levi's Haute Magie. No wonder you find it cloudy, for it was never meant for the uninitiated reader.
So obviously, K.H. had mentioned to Sinnett where this came from, but it's not in the letter. That, remember the quote that I discovered in his book? So for whatever reason, Sinnett, because he knew French, was reading the original French version of Eliphas Levi's book, but apparently he found it extremely complicated, and I agree, it's very complicated and isn't really theosophical from a theosophical point of view. It's from more of a ceremonial magic point of view.
Eliphas studied from the Rosicrucian manuscripts, now reduced to 3 copies in Europe. These expound our Eastern doctrines from the teachings of Rosicrucian, who, upon his return from Asia, dressed them up in a semi-Christian garb intended as a shield for his pupils against clerical revenge. One must have the key to it, and that key is a science per se, Rosicrucian taught orally. Saint Germain recorded the good doctrines in figures, and his only ciphered manuscript remained with his staunch friend and patron, the benevolent German prince, from whose house and in whose presence he made his last exit home. Speaking of figures and numbers, Eliphas addresses those who know something of the Pythagorean doctrines. Yes, some of them do sum up all philosophy and include all doctrines.
Now, let's just point out here that he's saying that the original Rosicrucian teachings were inspired teachings. These came from adepts. So obviously Rosencrantz, who instituted Rosicrucian doctrine or philosophy, was someone who was somewhat elevated in consciousness and understanding. So they were able to work with him, and like so many other organizations, the Freemasons, for example. In the beginning, they have actual good teachings. But once the originator, the founder of that organization is no longer in incarnation, those teachings tend to devolve.
They're added to, subtracted from, diluted, changed.
Yes, and everybody who has an opinion on it kind of manipulates them to match their own opinions, and they get terribly, what's the word? Bastardized.
Ooh.
No.
I mean,
they get terribly distorted.
Many people use that exact term for yoga. In the Western world, where yoga is equated to a fitness class, some people say that that's a bastardization of yoga. And the Bible, we're not going to use that term for the Bible, but Jesus didn't write the Bible.
Yeah, and if you have ever read the Old Testament, you can see immediately that many of those books were anything but inspired.
Would it be worthwhile to give a little history of Rosicrucianism, or is not?
I don't know enough about it.
Okay.
It's not. I kind of looked into it a little bit, but I didn't find anything of great value, so I didn't pursue it anymore.
I had heard that the word Rosicrucianism came from the Order of the Rose Cross, but now we're hearing a name, Rosencrantz. I've never heard that name before.
Well, that would make more sense that it came from his own. These are his teachings.
Right, Rosencrantz, rather. Yeah, it would be. Okay, moving along. Isaac Newton understood them well, but withheld his knowledge very prudently for his own reputation. Of course, because he didn't want to get crucified for his...
No, he was smart.
He was very smart, yes.
Yeah.
And very unfortunately for the writers of Saturday Review and its contemporaries, you seem to admire it. I do not.
Saturday Review was a newspaper at the time. I think it was a weekly. And they talked about all current events around the world, but it was in London is where it was produced.
However talented from the literary point of view, a paper which gives vent to such unprogressive and dogmatic ideas as the one I came across in it lately ought to lose caste among its more liberal colleagues. Scientific men, it thinks, quote, do not make at all good observers, end quote, at exhibitions of modern magic, spiritism, and other, quote, 9 days wonders. This is certainly not as it should be. It adds for, knowing as well as they do the limits of the natural, they should begin by assuming that what they see or what they think they see cannot be done, and should next look for the fallacy, etc., etc.
So, and that's exactly what they do even today.
Scientific people who are witnessing things.
Yes. What do? They say, well, we don't know how to do it, so obviously it's fraud. It's a very pompous and a very egotistical point of view. The better point of view would be to say, well, maybe there's something to it, but I can't explain it, and maybe at some point we will be able to, but right now we simply don't know.
That's more open-minded. The former is closed-minded.
Exactly.
We don't know how it's done, so it's fake. Well, how do you really know that?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're going to jump to the conclusion that it's fake because my ego requires that.
And a lot of people do that, whether they're in the field of science and medicine or not. We don't want to believe that something could be true that we didn't know.
Yes. If I don't know it ain't true. That's exactly right.
Yes. They know the limits of the natural! Exclamation mark. Oh, century of conceit and mental obscuration! Exclamation mark. And we are invited to London among these academical rags whose predecessors persecuted Mesmer and branded Saint Germain an impostor.
So a rag is a pejorative term for a sensational magazine or newspaper.
Now, this is the first time he's mentioning Saint Germain that we've heard in these letters.
I believe so. I believe that's true.
We should probably make a distinction that Saint Germain was a human, but he's also regarded by some traditions as one of the ascended masters, which is not, well, sometimes they are lumped in with these teachers. I'm not explaining that very well, but it's too. We should make a distinction of who Saint Germain is.
Yes, Saint Germain was obviously, according to KH, an enlightened person. However, what you're referring to, these enlightened masters,
or ascended masters,
ascended masters, came from an offshoot of theosophy in the 1930s. And you can read their...
What was that group called?
Well, it's the I Am movement.
The I Am movement, okay.
I don't remember the exact... There are different branches even within that.
Yes, the Saturday Review has let us off easily enough. Not so the Spiritualist. Now, the Spiritualist is the other publication that we're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Poor perplexed wee paper. You give it a tremendous blow, losing its footing on mediumistic ground. It fights its death struggle for supremacy of English adeptship over Eastern knowledge.
So we're beginning to realize, all of them are beginning to realize, that they're taking on a kind of a dangerous task, setting the spiritualists straight as to what it is that they are actually encountering, and that it's not what they think it is. And when you mess, as we know, with people's ego, it brings out their biggest weapons. They get furious. And this is exactly what's happening.
I can almost hear its secret cry, quote, if we spiritualists are shown to be in the wrong box, so are you, theosophists. The great adept, the formidable Julius Cone, the Jewish Kabbalist, is certainly a dangerous enemy, and I am afraid our bodhisattvas will have to confess someday their profound ignorance before his mighty learning. Do we need to talk about Julius Cone?
He wrote an article for the Spiritualists, and completely denounced the Theosophical Society and everything that Sinnett had published in his book. But he has a very high opinion of himself and his knowledge of Kabbalism.
Okay. So we're seeing that the Theosophical Society was not free of conflict even, or controversy even way back then.
And it's going to happen whenever you try to present something new to the outside world and it disturbs their very firmly held beliefs.
Well, HPB still has that kind of unfortunate viewpoint from some circles today still.
Yeah, and as I pointed out in a former session, when she was told by her master that the time had come, she said, and now my martyrdom begins. She knew.
They knew it.
She knew. Yes. Maybe not to quite the extent that it did happen, but she knew that she was going to be assailed on every side.
Quote, real adepts like Gautama Buddha or Jesus Christ did not shroud themselves in mystery, but came and taught openly.
Now that's something that Julius Cone had said in his article.
Okay. Quoth our oracle. That means that he's being funny about...
Yes.
Okay, he's being funny about calling him an oracle. If they did, it's news to us, the humble followers of the former. Gautama is qualified the, quote, divine teacher, and at the same time, quote, God's messenger. See Spiritualist publication, July 8th, page 21. Where did that Cockney adept learn his Buddhism, I wonder?
So
Cockney is referring to his English accent, or where he's from in England?
Well,
Cockney.
Yes. It's kind of a pejorative because it's considered a low-class form of English speech, but
with that English, it's a specific English accent. Right?
Yes, and it's very, very common. basically saying he was a commoner.
So KH is saying that Cohn is incorrect in how he's describing the Buddha.
Well, yes, he said that both the Buddha and Jesus Christ spoke openly. They didn't try to hide anything, and that's simply not true. Even in the Bible, Jesus' disciples said, "Why do you tell us things in private, but when you speak to the public, you speak in parables?" And he said, "Because with you, I can speak openly, but with them, I have to use a different type of presentation." And the other thing, he claimed, Julius Cohn claimed that Buddha was God's messenger. Well, Buddhists don't believe in a God. They don't even worship any particular God. So we'll find that out quite a bit later when KH goes into a lot of detail about religion in general.
I annoyed at newspaper ribald notices? Certainly not. But I do feel a little wrathful at the sacrilegious utterances of J.K., Julius Cohn, that I confess. I felt like answering the conceited fool, but, quote, "so far shalt thou go and no further," again. Now, he's kind of losing his temper a little bit.
He's getting a little frustrated at this point, yes.
So masters are not perfect.
No.
The Hobogan, to whom I showed the passage, laughed till the tears streamed down his old cheeks. Now, is this one of his superiors?
Yes.
I wish I could. When the old lady reads it, there'll be a cedar or two damaged at Simla. Oh my gosh.
She's going to get a lot angrier than I am.
Go destroy the forest or something. Thanks indeed for your kind offer to let me have possession of the review scraps, but I would rather you should preserve them yourself, as these notices may prove unexpectedly valuable to you in a few years hence. To your offer to give a solemn pledge never to divulge anything without permission, I can give no answer at present. Neither its acceptance nor rejection depends on me, to tell you the truth, since it would be quite an unprecedented event to pledge an outsider to our own particular form of oath or promise, and that no other would hold good in my superior's opinion.
So here, of course, Sinnett realizes that his other pupils, at least the advanced ones, have taken an oath. Just like in a monastery, the novices have not taken an oath, but after a certain number of years, they have to decide whether they're going to continue or go back out in the outer world. But to continue, they have to take an oath of poverty, chastity, and whatever the rest of the oath is that they do. But in this case, of course, it's much more concrete than that. For one thing, they have to promise not to reveal anything. There are promises that have to do with their comportment, how they conduct themselves with the other pupils. Apparently, there are numerous rules that they have to agree to. And so Sinnett said, I'm offering to agree to whatever rules I need to in order for you to be able to work with me. And KH is saying, I appreciate that, but it wouldn't actually be a contract because you're not in a position to where you can adequately understand what that entails. So he's a little sad, a little reluctant, because he said, he's like, I wish you were at a point where that would actually apply, but it wouldn't be meaningful.
Unfortunately for both of us, once, or rather twice, upon a time, you made use of an expression which was recorded, and just 3 days ago, when pleading for some privileges for you, it was brought out before me very unexpectedly. Upon hearing it repeated and seeing it recorded, I had but to turn the other cheek to still more unexpected buffets of fortune dealt out by the respected hand of him whom I so revere. Cruel as the reminder seemed to me, it was just, for you have pronounced these words at Simla. I am a member of the Theosophical Society, but in no way a theosophist, you said.
Yeah,
Why would he say that? Why would Sinnett say that? Of course he's a theosophist.
Yeah, exactly. But whether he believed it or not, the fact that he said it to other people was recorded in the Akashic records. And KH was aware of it, and so were his superiors. And they confronted him with that. Why would he say that? And obviously he didn't have a good answer. He couldn't stand up for Sinnett because there was no adequate reason that he would do something like that.
He was just trying to save face so they wouldn't disregard him, or
who knows? Obviously he had some idea in his mind, but he's pointing out here that there's no reason for us to require an oath of you because you don't understand how these work.
I am not breaking confidence in revealing this result of my pleading to you, as I am even advised to do so. We have to travel then at the same slow rate at which we have hitherto gone, or halt at once and write finis at the bottom of our letters. I hope you will give preference to the former. Yeah, that would be very sad if they had to stop. Now that we are on the topic, I wish you would impress upon your London friends some wholesome truths that they are but too apt to forget, even when they have been told of them over and over again. The occult science is not one in which secrets can be communicated all of a sudden, by a written or even verbal communication. If so, all the brothers should have to do would be to publish a handbook of the art which might be taught in schools as grammar is. It is the common mistake of people that we willingly wrap ourselves and our powers in mystery, that we wish to keep our knowledge to ourselves, and will refuse wantonly and deliberately to communicate it.
And this is exactly what Hume has been complaining about all along. What's wrong with you guys? Why don't you just reveal this? We're educated, we're smart, we're intelligent. We're trying to help the world here, and you're making it difficult for us to make the world a better place. And he has told him before, we cannot make you understand these things. They can't just be written down in a book. It would be great if that were possible, but it's not.
Read Isis Unveiled and you'll see why, because they tried to do that.
Yes.
And it's not understandable.
Yes.
The truth is that until the neophyte attains to the condition necessary for that degree of illumination to which and for which he is entitled and fit, most, if not all, of the secrets are incommunicable. The receptivity must be equal to the desire to instruct. On the recipient's part, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
if
receptivity.
His receptivity is not up to the mark, the fact that the adept is willing to convey isn't going to make it happen.
Okay, on the adept. Okay. Understood. The illumination must come from within. Until then, no hocus pocus of incantations or mummery of appliances, no metaphysical lectures or discussions, no self-imposed penance can transmit it. All these are but means to an end, and all we can do is to direct the use of such means as have been empirically found by the experience of ages to conduce to the required object. And this was and has been no secret for thousands of years. Fasting, meditation, chastity of thought, chastity of word and deed, silence for certain periods of time to enable nature herself to speak to him who comes to her for information, control of the animal passions and impulses, utter unselfishness of intention, the use of certain incense and fumigations for physiological purposes, have been published as the means since the days of Plato and Iamblichus in the West, and since the far earlier times of our Indian rishis.
All right, so here he's delineating some of the things that a pupil or an aspiring pupil can do to raise himself or herself to the level of purity and receptivity where they can work with that individual.
Let's hear that list of practices again. Fasting, meditation, chastity of thought, word, and deed, silence for certain periods of time, control of the animal passions and impulses, utter unselfishness of intention. Is he saying the use of certain incense is good, or
yes?
No? Oh, okay, so that's okay.
But
wow.
you would need to know
which ones
are helpful.
And these refer to most of the things that we teach all the time in our Raja Yoga courses.
It's our tapas, it's our spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm. How these must be complied with to suit each individual temperament is a matter of his own experiment and the watchful care of his tutor or guru. Such is part of his course of discipline, and his guru or initiator can but assist him with the experience and willpower, but can do no more until the last and supreme initiation.
So remember, he has mentioned before that the adept is made, he is not created. In other words, it's on the aspirant.
Self-made.
Has to do all the work. All the teacher can do is give hints and suggestions. But the aspirant has to do all the work. It is self-transformation, raising your purity, your consciousness, your receptivity, your capacity as a vehicle for receiving this.
I love when our masters describe exactly what Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras describes, and that's what he's saying exactly right here is the process of yoga practice, which is discipline of the mind and purity of thoughts, and using a guru. Of course, we need a teacher to give us the hints and guide us, but teacher, guru can't do it for us. We have to do the work. We have to use our power of discernment, do these practices, tapas, daily for a long time.
For years,
a long time,
lifetimes.
Yes.
It's the ruthless stripping away of the ego. Not very sexy, but yeah.
He says the guru can but assist him, but can do no more until the last and supreme initiation. What do you think is meant by that?
Well, remember how at various points they can, with a touch, raise your consciousness. There apparently is at this last supreme initiation a much greater rise in consciousness that takes place.
I am also of the opinion that few candidates imagine the degree of inconvenience, nay, suffering and harm to himself, the said initiator submits to for the sake of his pupil. The peculiar physical, moral, and intellectual conditions of neophytes and adepts alike vary much, as anyone will easily understand. Thus, in each case, the instructor has to adapt his conditions to those of the pupil, and the strain is terrible. For to achieve success, we have to bring ourselves into a full rapport with the subject under training. You've said this many, many, many times, even in our sessions here, that in order for these highly evolved people to communicate with us, it's a strain for them to lower their vibrations to our level.
Yes, and it goes beyond that even. They are delaying their own advancement in order to do this. He'll point that out later, that it actually costs them a tremendous amount that most of the pupils don't even recognize.
The greater the powers of the adept, the less he is in sympathy with the natures of the profane. That's funny that they use that word, who often come to him saturated with the emanations of the outside world, those animal emanations of the selfish, brutal crowd that we so dread. And the longer he, the adept, was separated from that world and the purer he has himself become, the more difficult the self-imposed task. Knowledge can only be communicated gradually, And some of the highest secrets, if actually formulated even in your well-prepared ear, might sound to you as insane gibberish, notwithstanding all the sincerity of your present assurance that, quote, absolute trust defies misunderstanding, end quote. This is the real cause of our reticence. This is why people so often complain with a plausible show of reason that no new knowledge is communicated to them, though they have toiled for it for 2, 3, or more years. Wow.
2, 3, or more years, yeah. Many of his Asian pupils have toiled for 20, 30, or 40 years and haven't had as much attention as Sinnett is getting right now.
Let those who really desire to learn abandon all and come to us, instead of asking or expecting us to go to them. Now that's probably both physically and metaphysically, or literally and figuratively.
Right. Come out of your world into ours is one way that he expresses it.
But how is this to be done in your world and atmosphere? Woke up sad on the morning of the 18th, did you?
Now, remember, in the previous letter, number 19, they kind of hinted that they were going to try an experiment on the 17th. On the night of the 17th, we assume, he didn't detail it, but it sounded like KH was once again going to try to appear to him in astral form while Sinnett was asleep. So that's what he's referring to.
Well, well, patience, my good brother, patience. Something has occurred, though you have preserved no consciousness of the event. Oh,
so KH made the effort, and Sinnett probably perceived it but didn't remember it.
But let this rest. But what more can I do? How am I to give expression to ideas for which you have as yet no language? The finer and more susceptible heads, like yourself, get more than others do, and even when they get a little extra dose, it is lost for want of words and images to fix the floating ideas. Perhaps, and undoubtedly, you know not to what I now refer. You will know it one day. Patience. Well, that's funny that he's using that word because that's the name of his wife, too.
Right.
To give more knowledge to a man than he is yet fit to receive is a dangerous experiment, and furthermore, other considerations go to restrain me.
So, to give more knowledge to a man than he is yet fit to receive is a dangerous experiment.
Tell that to Hume.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Hume doesn't want to hear that.
Well, I know. The sudden communication of facts, so transcending the ordinary, is in many instances fatal not only to the neophyte but to those directly around him. Wow, that's interesting. It is like delivering an infernal machine or a cocked and loaded revolver into the hands of one who had never seen such a thing. That's really interesting. Our case is exactly analogous. We feel that the time is approaching and that we are bound to choose between the triumph of truth or the reign of error and terror. We have to let in a few chosen ones into the great secret, or allow the infamous shammers to lead Europe's best minds into the most insane and fatal of superstitions, spiritualism. And we do feel as if we were delivering a whole cargo of dynamite into the hands of those we are anxious to see defending themselves against the red-capped brothers of the shadow.
Okay, once again, red-capped brothers of the shadow. Why red-capped?
Who's wearing red caps?
Well, I'll tell you. They are Buddhist lamas. So in Tibet,
wow,
prior to the reformer who appeared in the 14th century, as we heard in letter number 18, to reform Buddhism, it was almost as corrupt as Hinduism was in their misunderstanding of spiritual practices, and in their, even worse in some ways, because they were using them for gray magic and even for black magic. So that was the reason why it had to be revitalized and purified, and that's what happened in the 14th century. So KH and his brand of Tibetan Buddhist lamas and monks were of this new variety, but the ones who still worship the old system, which is often referred to as Bon, wore red caps, for example. You know, the big helmets that with the fringe on the crest of it. The good ones wore the yellow ones, and the other sect wore the red hats.
Interesting.
We'll hear more about them.
You are curious to know where I am traveling about, to learn more of my great work and mission. Were I to tell you, you could hardly make anything of it. To test your knowledge and patience, I may answer you, though, this once. Wow. I now come from Sakya Jong. To you, the name will remain meaningless. Wow, so that's not a public place that we would know about. Sakya. Not
that Sinnett knew, for sure.
Repeat it before the old lady and observe the result.
So it appears that he kind of visited the camp of the enemy.
Oh, that's what that Sakya Jong.
Yes. So he's basically saying if you repeat that name to HPB, she knows what it is, and she's going to say, what?
Now, we have two adversaries. We have the Spiritualist movement, and then we have the Red-Capped Brothers, but they're different groups, obviously. So which enemy are
And they have
to?
the scientists. Everyone is against them, and the Christians.
Oh, my gosh. But I assume we're referring to the Red-Capped Brothers of the show.
Yes.
But to return, having then to deliver with one hand the much-needed yet dangerous weapon to the world, and with the other to keep off the shammers, the havoc produced by them already being immense, do you not think we have a right to hesitate, to pause, and feel the necessity of caution as we never did before? To sum up, the misuse of knowledge by the pupil always reacts upon the initiator. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
No,
I've never heard that before.
are opening up themselves to some pretty nasty karma. And they have worked for lifetimes to get rid of their own personal karma.
It's probably not only karma.
And now they're opening up themselves. It's everything. The vibrations that they're exposed to, their own progress is exposed to danger at this point.
Wow. And I don't believe you know yet that in sharing his secrets with another, the adept by an immutable law is delaying his own progress to the eternal rest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but it's not eternal. It's eternal is like nirvana isn't totally eternal.
No, but it seems like it's eternal.
Perhaps what I now tell you may help you to a truer conception of things and to better appreciate our mutual position. Loitering on the way does not conduce to a speedy arrival at the journey's end. And it must strike you as a truism that a price must be paid for everything and every truth by somebody. And in this case, we pay it. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Fear not, I'm willing to pay my share. That sounds like you. You say that. You say things like that sometimes. And I said so to those who put the question to me. I will not desert you, nor will I show myself less sacrificing than the poor, worn-out mortality we know as the old lady. Oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
The above must remain between us two. I expect you to regard this letter as strictly confidential, for it is neither for publication nor your friends. Wow, but here it is published.
Mm-hmm.
I want you alone to know it. Only if all this was more generally known to candidates for initiation, I feel certain they would be both more thankful and more patient, as well as less inclined to be irritated at what they consider our reticence. Few possess your discretion. Fewer still know to appreciate at their true value the results obtained. Well, I'm glad he's commending Sinnett for his discretion, at least.
Yeah, Sinnett is opening up himself to some difficulties, and he seems to be willing to do that. He's finding out one after another what those potential difficulties are, and we're going to see another one right now.
Your 2 letters to Stainton Moses will lead to no result whatsoever. He will remain as immovable, and your trouble will have been taken in vain. You will receive a letter from him full of suspicion and with more than a few unkind remarks. You can't persuade him that Imperator is a living brother, for that was tried and failed.
So he's pointing out that because of his ego, Stainton Moses isn't willing to believe anything except what his own little mind has conjured up. Anything that refutes that is going to set him off.
We can't persuade him that Imperator is a living brother, but Stainton Moses believes that Imperator is an enlightened being communicating with him.
Originally, it was, but when they abandoned the experiment, he was still communicating with some entity that he still identified as Imperator. And that was made clear to Sinnett, that it was no longer that high being that was revealing information to him. But he's saying here, your attempt to clarify what is in truth, what occurred, the change that took place, is not going to help. He's not going to accept that at all.
Okay. Unless indeed you convert him to popular exoteric Lamaism, which regards the brothers who pass from the body of one great Lama to that of another as las or disembodied spirits. Remember what I said in my last letter about planetary spirits. The Changchub, an adept who has, by the power of his knowledge and soul enlightenment, become exempt from the curse of unconscious transmigration, may, instead of reincarnating himself only after bodily death, do so, and repeatedly, during his life if he chooses. We should explain that.
So what is he talking about?
If an adept has reached such a level that we can, or that they can, not lose consciousness when they die, that's an extremely high level of advancement, and then we can do that. They can do that during their lifetime, which is odd.
So, in other words, take up a new incarnation and that doesn't mean keeping 2 bodies at the same time. It means transferring consciousness from the old body to the new body, which is supposedly what happens with the Dalai Lama and the Tasha Lama.
Now, this happens before the body dies.
Well,
or as it's dying?
It's supposedly, yeah, I don't know all the details. I couldn't even pretend to. But it means in consciousness, leaving the body and transferring to another new incarnation. There are apparently other instances where a highly evolved individual will take up a body of a child, for example, that has just died, but they are able to revive it.
Wow.
And so the consciousness that was animating it before is going through the regular after-death process, and yet that body is now being used by this highly advanced individual.
And could be used for the duration of a full physical life.
Right. HPB and Damodar and Alcott met a female yogi they called Maji, And supposedly she had done that more than once.
The child must be so young as to not have developed its own personality yet.
It would, and in a state of purity.
Like infancy.
Or a little bit older, but very young still.
Wow. And to our viewers, this is not the normal process of reincarnation at all.
Not at all.
This
That's
is
very, very rare, extremely rare.
And the reason that it would occur is if an enlightened, or if one of the adepts or one of these wise teachers needs to stick around and do work and not have a period of long rest in between incarnations, this is a way to do that, to stay here.
And
basically.
even the period of infancy, there's a heck of a lot you can do as a 6-month-old baby.
So they're spending 10 years, 15 years recapitulating and learning and growing as a human child before they can actually resume their work.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems very bizarre, doesn't it? But some of these things we definitely don't understand, but if it exists, it exists.
Something that might seem a little bit more understandable is if we practice meditation enough and raise our consciousness enough out of our brain, which is physical, the brain is physical, wouldn't it stand to reason that you might be able to stay conscious during dreaming? And when you fall asleep at night, I think it sounds reasonable that you may be able to be aware at night, even though your body is sleeping. And take that to the next level. If you can be lucid dreaming or not lose consciousness while sleeping, why couldn't you do that after the body dies? And that's what these teachings give us.
I've looked a little bit into the concept of lucid dreaming, but I haven't seen any reports of anyone who has full consciousness.
I use that term lightly. Terry and I don't advocate the astral significance.
No, not at all.
I probably shouldn't have used the term lucid dreaming, but because dreaming is in the astral world. So whichever plane of existence we're remaining conscious on or in during sleep, we could further that, take it a step further, and as we progress, when the death of the physical body occurs, it stands to reason that consciousness could be maintained. Of course, that's many lifetimes in the future for me, but it's part of our path.
Many New Age people really focus on this idea of becoming psychic or clairvoyant. And as long as it's on the astral plane, it's pretty useless. It really is. And in fact, it's a detriment because it's really easy to get lost in that Maya and to wander basically for not just years, but for lifetimes.
The astral plane is just one of the 7 dimensions that we operate in. And for some reason, that is more accessible to many people because it's glamorous, it's shiny. But the goal that that the masters suggest, that the teachings suggest, is to raise our consciousness from the physical world to the level of the higher mental plane where the soul exists. And it's a much different environment than the astral plane. And that's the realm, that's the environment, that's the dimension, I guess, the dimension of existence that we want to operate on if we can.
So to recapitulate in slightly different words, don't get distracted by the astral plane activity.
Yeah.
Instead, go through that level by meditation and develop your ability to be aware on the higher mental plane, as Paul said. And then later, once you have solidified that ability, then, if necessary, you can be trained to do some operations on the astral plane, and it won't be dangerous.
If needed.
But to try to develop clairvoyance on the astral plane, for most of us, is nothing but heartache and danger.
It's where emotions exist, it's where dreams exist. And in the Vedantic terminology, some of our viewers may not be familiar with our constitution of man, but in the Koshic model, it'd be the Vijnana Maya Kosha, the level of our inner teacher, which is our soul, basically, where our soul exists, our higher self.
Yes.
Let's continue. Let's see. We were reading about changing changing bodies with consciousness. He holds the power of choosing for himself new bodies, whether on this or any other planet. While in possession of his old form.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
This is talking about something even far more advanced than what I was imagining.
So this is a separate process. He holds the power of choosing for himself new bodies, whether on this or any other planet, while in possession of his old form that he generally preserves for purposes of his own. I wonder if the old form would be seated in meditation or just like in a sleeping, or because certainly it wouldn't be operating in the world.
We're going to find out something about this very soon in our next few classes.
My goodness. Read the book of QT, and you will find in it these laws. What is the book of QT?
That's a very esoteric book in Tibetan Buddhism.
Is it available?
It's not available in the outer world, but some of the teachings are.
Wow.
It was, I don't know where Sinnett would have found any written copies, but there must have been HPB, well, actually,
HPB, might translate for you some paragraphs as she knows them by rote. Mm-hmm. To her, you may read the present. So only that paragraph he wants.
So when she wrote The Voice of the Silence, for example, this was a translation of a portion of this book of QT.
Not the stanzas of Xian?
Well, that is also part of it, and the Secret Doctrine was also part of it. So yes, it's all combined.
Now it was written in Tibet. It was in Tibetan, so it was part of the Buddhist tradition.
Yes,
perhaps.
And I don't know what part of it would have been available to Sinnett.
Wow, we're almost to the end of letter 20. Let's keep going. Do I often laugh at the helpless way in which you grope in the dark? Most decidedly not. Where did such a thought come from? And that other, to have my portrait?
So apparently, Sinnett had asked, do you laugh at the way I am groping here, trying to understand things?
Oh, okay.
He said, of course not. And then he said, and what's this desire to have my portrait?
Why not? I'd want to have his portrait too.
Exactly.
Never had but one taken in my whole life, a poor pharaoh type produced in the days of the Gaudiamus by a traveling female artist. Some relative, I suppose, of the Munich beer hall beauties that you have interviewed of late. Sinnett interviewed some German beer hall. What is this? This is hilarious.
I don't know if that was while he was in London, possibly, that he interviewed some Munich beer hall beauties. Wow. I don't know where that comes from.
And from whose hands I had to rescue it. The pharaoh type is there, but the image itself has vanished. The nose peeled off and one of the eyes gone, no other to offer. I dare not promise, for I never break my word, yet I may try some day to get you one.
This is really interesting.
So there was a portrait.
Yes, and what is a pharaoh type? We've probably heard the term tin type. You've never heard that?
Is it like a negative on metal, like a photograph?
Yes.
Okay.
So this was one of the very earliest forms of photography, of commercial photography.
Instead of paper, it was tin.
Exactly. It was not actually tin. It was. That's why he refers to it as pharaoh type. You know, cans. We used to call them tin cans. Right. Well, they're steel, but or metal, but they have a coating of zinc or tin on them. And this was the same way. It had a coating of tin, apparently, but they were sometimes referred to as tin types and sometimes as pharaoh types. So yes, it was a metal sheet. It was exposed and developed directly on that metal, and that was your portrait. So the process was apparently developed around 1853. And that gives us a clue as to when KH was in his Gaudiamus days, which is a term of the revelry that college students engage in on the weekends and when they're not having to study.
So in the 50s, he was in his late teens, early 20s.
Yes. So it sounds like he is not much older than HPB and Alcott.
Okay.
Is my guess.
Interesting.
The other thing, and there would have been vendors of these portraits at events like Oktoberfest or something like that. Mm-hmm. They would go around and say, "Hey, you want your?" It was the first form of Polaroid camera, I guess.
Oh my God!
Because they could develop it on site and you could take it home with you. But obviously, this wasn't a very
reliable.
Yeah, because over the years they decay and the emulsion falls off, and so he's saying it doesn't look very pretty now. And the other thing he said was, "I never make a promise, but what I keep it." So that's something that we can do, and just say, instead of saying, "Oh yeah, I'll do that tomorrow," say, "I will try to remember to do that tomorrow."
Don't promise if you're...
Little things like that can make a big difference.
In terms of purity.
Yes, exactly. How many times I'm guilty of it myself, to say, "Oh yeah, I'll do that, I'll take care of it," and then I don't, and then later I look back and say, "Oh,
that's a
I
white
shouldn't
lie.
have made that. Yeah. I shouldn't have made that promise when I didn't intend to put forth the effort to make it happen."
Of course, the rebuttal would be, "Oh, it's harmless."
Well,
it's still a mistruth, though.
No, and if you're going to offer yourself as a chela, there's a much higher standard that is required than from just average people.
Very true.
It's a huge difference.
Okay, the last paragraph of the letter. Quotation from Tennyson. So apparently Sinnett asked about this.
Yeah, remember that poem by Tennyson that Sinnett said, "Wait, I've never heard of that one." And so obviously he said, "Well, what is that from? I'm not familiar with it."
And then KH's reply is, "Really cannot say. Some stray lines picked up in the astral light or in somebody's brain and remembered."
Yeah.
Wow.
So here, this gives us a clue. We don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on books. We can just read them directly.
I never forget what I once see or read. Wow. A bad habit, so much so that often and unconsciously I string together sentences of stray words and phrases before my eyes, which may have been used 100 years ago or will be 100 years hence. Wait a minute. Is he predicting the future here?
Yeah, that sounds very strange, doesn't it?
Yeah. In relation to quite a different subject. Oh, yeah, he does say in relation to a different subject. That's interesting. Let's read that again. A bad habit, so much so that often unconsciously I string together sentences of stray words and phrases before my eyes, which may have been used 100 years ago, or will be 100 years hence, in relation to quite a different subject. So he remembers words and phrases and he strings them together, but surely with coherence, not just randomly. I'm sure it's relatable to the topic at hand.
He is able to kind of tune in to things that are happening around the world.
He's making connections.
It's
making correlations.
Exactly. And when he sees something that looks like it may be interesting, then he tunes in more carefully to it and listens to it.
And that's how all the masters operate. They look out over the world and they are aware of what's going on at some level, and they could focus in if they need to.
So they have a much more advanced type of internet than what we have today.
Yes.
They can sort out all of the nonsense very quickly. We still have to struggle to figure out what's useful and what's not.
True. Laziness and real lack of time. The old lady called me a brain pirate and a plagiarist the other day for using a whole sentence of 5 lines, which she is firmly convinced I must have pilfered from Dr. Wilder's brain as, 3 months later, he reproduced it in an essay of his on prophetic intuition. Wow.
So he must have been thinking about it, this Dr. Wilder or Wilder, whatever,
Okay.
Wilder, I think. And KH picked up on his thoughts. And then later it appeared in print. And HPB accused him of being a brain pirate.
Now, we talk about how siddhis could be used for evil purposes. This is not what's going on here.
No, he's using it for educational purposes.
Yes.
But we're going to find out quite a bit later that something occurred previously in one of the other letters that's going to come back to haunt him because of this very thing.
KH?
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Okay. Never had to look into the old philosopher's brain cells. Got it somewhere in a northern current. Don't know. So why is he writing in shortened phraseology?
He's just kind of musing.
This is a departure from how he normally writes them.
Yeah, but it's also something that's off topic. It's not something important that he's he's just kind of like saying thoughts out loud.
Write this for your information as something new for you, I suppose. Thus, a child may be born bearing the greatest resemblance in features to another person, thousands of miles off, no connection to the mother, never seen by her, but whose floating image was impressed upon her soul memory during sleep or even waking hours and reproduced upon the sensitized plate of living flesh she carries in her. What the heck?
Yeah, exactly. So let's take a look at that. Thus, a child may be born bearing the greatest resemblance and features to another person, thousands of miles off, no connection to the mother, never seen by her, but whose floating image was impressed upon her soul memory during sleep or even waking hours, and reproduced upon the sensitized plate of living flesh she carries in her. So he's describing an expecting mother carrying a child, and obviously everything that the mother does has an effect.
Birds are out there.
Everything that the mother does has an effect on this unborn child. You've maybe heard of mothers expecting a child who will listen to very nice music specifically so that child, developing child, is growing in a very calm, peaceful environment. Imagine the difference of someone who goes to a bar every night and is surrounded by smoke and loud music and people, and you're expecting a child. So huge difference between the two. But he's saying that just a thought that someone maybe thousands of miles away had in their mind may have drifted, and this mother sees that picture, and her child ends up resembling this person that she's never met before.
That's incredible.
Sounds crazy, doesn't it?
Yet I believe the lines quoted were written by Tennyson years ago. So he's tying this back to the question. And they are published. I hope these disjointed reflections and explanations may be pardoned in one who remained for over 9 days in his stirrups without dismounting. 9 days on the horse without sleeping or dismounting?
Yeah, and once again, this sounds crazy to me. another one of those to just
History.
kind of put in the back of your mind and see if we get some clarification later.
Yes, I am tired and therefore will close. Yours faithfully, KH. In October, I will be in Bhutan. I have a favor to ask of you. Try and make friends with Ross Scott. I need him.
Yes. So Sinnett is on his way to Simla for the founding of this.
From where? Where's he traveling?
From Allahabad.
Okay.
Remember, this letter was received at Ambala, which is not about 1-2 days journey at the time. To journey from Allahabad, of course, they had trains, so that would have been much faster. But it was still quite an undertaking to travel from Allahabad to Simla. Probably a couple of days of travel by train, and if they had to do part of it by carriage, then of course that's much slower still. But he's on his way for the founding of this new Simla Eclectic Theosophical Society, and Ross Scott is a young man who was Irish, and the masters had their eye on him as a potential future chela. So he's saying to Sinnett, please make friends with him because he's going to be there also. And I need him. They've got a project in mind for him. So that's it for today, I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so lots of interesting stuff, and it just keeps getting more and more intriguing as we go.
It does.
So
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.
Oh, as always, if there's a comment or a question, post it, write it, and we won't make any promises like we just learned, but we will do our best to answer.
Very good. Yes, we will. We will do our best to answer any questions that come up.
Namaste.